So I washed my hair, but I didn't put anything on it. And without putting anything on it, the shampoo that I showed you, the Cream of Nature, still makes it moist. So I'm happy. And it has a little bit of this, like, sort of a more of an afro texture. I'm gonna pause this and come back after I do something to my hair, but I wanted to show you guys why I like it. Now, the only thing about it is that I may go back to, like, I'll alternate shampoos because my hair used to do better when I used to use some shampoos sometime, some shampoo a different time. So what I do like about it is that it made it shinier. That's what I'm trying to say. That's the phrase. And I didn't put any castor oil. So I'm gonna pause this, come back after I put castor oil. So what I did now is I put the castor oil in and it makes it shiny, which is good. So I found that the way it made it shiny was with that shampoo. So as you can see, it has that texture that I always want to get. I want it to look more like an afro. So what I did the other day was, it was wet. I blew it dry just enough to take the dripping off so that it wouldn't drip. But then I left it wet and I went like this. So my mom didn't like it. She was like, "Oh, it looks matted that way." And that's part of what I'm saying. Like when I was saying in a previous video where I was saying this won't stay afro, it'll get straighter. It won't stay afro. But what, at least what it does, this shampoo does for me, is it gives me some of that afro texture. So I'll show you what I mean. You see how that won't stay? It'll kind of start to straighten a bit. It won't stay afro, but it gives more of that afro look. So if you're like me and you went natural and you want more of an afro look, but you can't get it for some reason, I think this shampoo, Cream of Nature, uh oh, I forgot the name of it now. I'll pause this and I'll find out. So here it is. This is Cream of Nature. It's sulfate free, which I like. And it's argan oil from Morocco. This is the one that gives me this type of texture so that it doesn't look as straight, and it looks like this, which is part this is part of what I wanted. So I wanted to show you guys that. Now I'll talk about gang stalking. So again, they're trying to get me upset, but why they want to get me upset is because they don't want me to do what I really was doing with the Bella Soul Fashion Fun Femme, at the time it was Twitter account, which is trying to get a way to make sure we as Americans can achieve the same things and have a new generation achieve the same things that we were able to achieve when I was younger. I told you I was born in 1973. And when I was growing up, the world just seemed like it was so, I don't know, it's beyond hopeful. Like we actually saw things positive things. Like I told you guys in a previous video, I would turn on the TV and I would see a lot of different races hanging out together, having fun. Bands consisted of different groups of people. The music was positive. We had activities to do. Like I told you in a previous video, we were busy. Like if we were in, doing after school things, we were going out to different activities, movies. Like to be able to go to a movie theater was a big deal. And you had little parties. So I want to bring the world, hopefully, back to that kind of feeling, not going back in time, but bringing that feeling. And my generation, hopefully, can, if we work together, get that feeling again. I told you I'm a Democrat. So part of achieving that, I think, is having the same type of freedoms we had before. I believe that we should have freedom of reproduction. So people who want to reproduce can, people who don't want to reproduce don't have to. But the freedom and the options that we had when I was growing up. I think Roe versus Wade was passed in the same year I was born, I think 1973. So that was an option. Another thing that we had when I was growing up is we had the different types of services so that if people needed something, like now I'm going through this disability, I got welfare. That was a blessing for me. Um, all of these things that I grew up so that you didn't feel like you had to be homeless. You had to, be isolated. We had ways of keeping people together, talking amongst ourselves. We had television shows where everyone was talking. When I was growing up, thank goodness, we had talk shows. So we had Phil Donahue, thank goodness, Oprah Winfrey, Sally Jesse Raphael. Oh, so many. By the time I was older in my 20s, we had Queen Latifah, Ricky Lake, uh meaning we had so many options, but I wasn't into that as a 20 something. I was more into the court show. So then we had Judge Judy, we had People's Court, we had two People's Court. The first one was the original, and now we have Judge Million, meaning we had an environment where you heard different people talking about their lives. We had so many different things we could do, meaning it wasn't like we was bored. And we didn't have the computers for the most part. I think the internet came about in a big way in the late 90s. So I'm talking about years of people just having fun and having, even if you didn't go anywhere special, you didn't necessarily have to go on vacation. You stayed where you are and you were able to go different places. And we all had social networks. There should be no point in our lives when we feel that we have no one. There are too many, there are billions of people, I think like 8 billion people. There is someone. So that's the feeling I hope to bring back. And that's part of why I'm going to continue to do these videos and talk about gang stalking, because I think this is happening to so many people, but they didn't have the word to call it. Like you think you know things are happening to you, but what is this thing called? We didn't have the ability to say, oh, this is that, that is this. I'm hoping that we are talking about gang stalking on YouTube and on Twitter and different things, but I'm hoping that someone in the media, like a talk show, will pick up some of the things. I hear some of the things that they talk about that are related to gang stalking, but I'm hoping that we get to a point where people can pick up some of the gang stalking terminology, like being targeted. You hear it on the news, but meaning not just being targeted for one thing, but a series of being targeted, which is part of what a targeted individual feels like. We feel like we're always being targeted, not like, oh, today I was targeted. No, we feel like people are always targeting you. And I'm hoping, if you guys are interested, I'm hoping when I feel well to just do a live with a few people. It won't be long because my voice won't stay for a long time. And I don't want to come on like looking like a crazy person. But hopefully I can do a live. If you're interested, let me know. There are some people who I would like to do a live with to talk about how the media has covered gang stalking in a negative way. But recently, I feel that that's changing. And I hope that we can talk about that and say, like, how, when I watched a coverage, two different reports. One report was so good, it was probably from about 2012, and they were talking about being targeted, and they were in California. It was so good. They talked about things that we've, as targeted individuals, have talked about years ago, and it was good. But at the end they said, well, it's probably something psychological, which it isn't. The other report was a much longer report, and it made them seem like they were nuts. But again, I think what happened was, my opinion my opinion is that they didn't have the right terminology for the time. So I think a lot of this is about having the right terminology at the time it's happening. And now that we have the right terminology for this time, it makes sense. So we're seeing things on the news that match the terminology. But I think it's just like I was saying in a previous video. At the time things happened in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s, the terminology for this type of thing didn't make sense. So I think what happened at the time when they're describing it, I can sit back and say, oh, yeah, I know what that is. And I can find legitimate sources that will prove it. But without the right terminology, how do you get the proper coverage for this? And so I'm hoping that we could do a live. If you guys are interested, you can definitely at me, where a few of us get together and talk about what kind of terminology helps people understand what this type of group stalking is, being targeted for multiple things, including scams, the break ins. So if you're interested, please feel free to at me. Thank you so much for your comments. I appreciate it. Thank you for watching.